Evening, everyone. So I'm joining you from Corvallis, Oregon, the Willamette Valley, just west of the Cascade Mountains, the ancestral land of the Kalapuya and Chippenafa tribes, the sacred mountain of Patimamwi, and also the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and enlightened masters of the past, present, and future, the Dharma protectors, the Naga, the Neo, Vajrapani, Dharma protecting devas, the sun, the moon, the wind, the rain, the snow, the stars, the fire, spirit of technology, um, spirits of the plants and the trees, animals, the 2, 4, 6, and 8-leggeds, the winged ones, the ones who swim in the water. May they all be with us, helping us, guiding us, and protecting us, so we may hear what we most need to hear, see what we most need to see. In the words, in between the words. So I've been reflecting on the stories that we get taught and stories that we tell about our life. And there's stories, traditional stories that have a beginning and a middle and an end, and there's a protagonist and there's a journey and there's a moral. I'm thinking a little bit more about the stories that are so embedded in our culture and in our being that they get taught through accumulation of disperse actions or comments. So the woman that's told, "You look good. Have you lost weight?" Or the boy who's crying and is told, "Man up." Or child with darker skin and a mother with lighter skin, the child asked, "Is that your mom?" So we have these stories, that these incidents underline beliefs about what should be happening if our life is going right or normal. And it seems like in Zen, in the experience that I've had, that we have our own culture. Hesitate to suggest too much about other sanghas, but I've had a chance to practice with some different sanghas over the years, and there seems to be some common threads. We have our own stories and our own beliefs about what it means to be a good Zen Buddhist, good student, a good priest or monk. And sometimes these may flip the traditional narratives. So instead of falling short if you aren't making enough money, there might be more of a sense of shame if we're earning too much money. Or instead of the story of I'm not doing enough, it might be not practicing enough, not sitting enough zazen. Or the story that I'm not a real Zen student if I'm not doing koans, or if I haven't met Kensho, or if I was serious about my practice, I would be ordained or living in a monastery or fill in the blank. So there's this tendency also to seek acknowledgement from the Sangha, from the teacher certainly. And so thinking about that, I was reminded of this teaching from the Buddha, from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of the Eights. He says, "Bhikkhus, these 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. What 8? Gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain." I'll skip just a little bit because there's some redundancy, as you may know, from the Pali Canon. Because when an uninstructed worldling meets with gain, he does not reflect, she does not reflect thus. This gain that I have met is impermanent, suffering, and subject to change. They do not understand as it really is. Likewise, when they meet with loss and fame and disrepute. Gain obsesses their mind and loss obsesses their mind. Likewise, fame, likewise, disrepute, and so forth. They are attracted to fame and repelled by dispute, attracted to praise and repelled by blame. Thus involved with attraction and repulsion, they are not free from birth, from old age and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and anguish. They are not freed from suffering, I say. Whereas the instructed noble disciple understands this gain that I've encountered it is impermanent. It is suffering and it is subject to change. And they are not attracted to pleasure or repulsed by pain. Having thus discarded the attraction and repulsion, they are freed from birth, from old age and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and anguish. They are freed from suffering, I say. So we're pulled about by these stories. I want the pleasure. I don't want the pain. I want to be seen as the good Zen student. I don't want to be seen as the bad Zen student. I don't want to get rung out of the room not having passed my koan, or, again, fill in the blank. But these stories only have the meaning that we've agreed on. In the American culture, the American Zen culture, we've decided that success is filled by such and such accomplishment. And other places have exactly the opposite. So thinking about this tendency, seek what's desirable internally and externally. Externally, another lens that I use in my own practice is shame resilience and addressing the issue on that interpersonal level, this unhealthy striving. It's described as perfectionism. Perfectionism tells the story that if we live our life perfectly, we can avoid or minimize shame, blame, judgment, criticism. And in shame resilience work, the perfectionism is described as a 20-ton shield. Like, we really think that it's going to help. And so we're carrying this 20-ton shield around with us all this time. How can I live up to this ideal that I've set for myself as a good man, woman, priest, Zen student, father, child, carrying it around. And we're exhausting ourselves by carrying around these ideals. And then, should there actually be a problem, it's not even really effective. You can't protect yourself with something that weighs that much. From my training, I'm also a social worker and addictions counselor, and it feels very similar to a process addiction like gambling. So we use it for this particular goal, this aspiration. It's going to protect me from shame, blame, criticism, judgment. And when it doesn't work, because it's the human condition to experience shame, blame, criticism, and judgment, the thought isn't, oh, that strategy must not be effective, right? Way more common, the thought is, I wasn't perfect enough. Next time, if only I do this next thing, then I'll be safe. Then I'll be protected. And of course, perfection keeps moving the benchmark, right? So you come in, let's just roll with the spiritual practice. You come in as someone who's new to the Buddhism and the spiritual world, and it's like, okay, so I need to know the forms, and then I'll be good. Then it's like, okay, now I know the forms, but now I need to get one of these little bibs, and then I'll be good. Oh, but now I really should be a priest, right? You know, the benchmark keeps moving and keeps moving and keeps moving, and we never quite catch it. We're always chasing it. So the Buddha's instructions are, like so many of his instructions, develop clear understanding. Understand, this is impermanent. Intrinsically, the gain and the loss are part of the same unit. You can't get one without the other. When you buy into one, you buy into both. And it is impermanent and it is suffering. So one of my root teachers used to say, easy to say, hard to do. Um, so I like to reflect on the Buddha's life, especially as we're in the time of Rahatsu. I believe you're going to be starting sesshin soon, some of you. So the Buddha, he left the palace and he took up ascetic practices. He practiced with 2 different teachers and mastered their instructions. And then he practiced with this group of 5 ascetics. And he really took asceticism to its nth degree. He talks about giving up breathing as a practice for extended periods of time, giving up eating for extended periods of time, to the point where the stories go that the devas are looking down on him and saying, like, I think he's dead. And having the thought, I've taken this to the nth degree and I'm still not enlightened. Maybe this isn't the way. And then having a memory of sitting as a young child in a rose apple tree and saying, I just dropped right into absorption as a young child. What about that? What if I explore that? And he took some food because he thought, I can't do that without food. And his 5 ascetic friends thought that he was a complete failure. I think they said something like, the recluse Gautama now lives luxuriously for eating some boiled rice and porridge. He has given up striving and reverted to luxury. So to his spiritual teachers, to his spiritual companions, according to the story that they were buying into, he was a failure. He was not living up to what it meant to be a real spiritual practitioner in that little subculture. And the thread that feels important in this is that his movement towards enlightenment throughout was not motivated by the 8 worldly concerns, but by a vow that was to understand the cause of suffering. And you can see through the steps of his journey from leaving the palace, when it would have been so easy to just move forward and become a king, when it would have been easy after mastering the teachings of his first teacher to say, well, great, I made it. Or his second teacher, or practicing with the 5 ascetics, just multiple times where he could have bought into the story, but the vow called him out. This vow is like a compass point, orienting us towards the journey of the spiritual, towards enlightenment, and it doesn't care about whether we're doing it right or wrong by anybody's external metrics. So there's this poem that I want to read that I think speaks very beautifully. It's by Dharma sister of mine, Lama Lekshe Tamang, talking about this vow, and I'll just read it. It's so beautiful. I promise, I vow. I breathe in and breathe out and make a wish. I walk my vow. I prostrated. I eat spaghetti and wrap my vow around the fork. I write my vow, even though words can't begin to explain it. I speak it softly, in private. I scribble my vow in condensation on the window of my car while waiting for the engine to warm up. I tap it out in Morse code on my right knee while waiting in the hospital to see a dying stranger. I practice my vow with speech. I say it in French and Spanish and Pig Latin. I form the words in sign language over and over, even though I don't know how. I sit with my vow, on my vow, beneath my vow, deep inside my vow, where there's no escape. I hold my vow in my hands and it makes me sweat. Even though this vow is a plague, I think it will cure me someday. I dream my vow. I mumble it during the night. I wake up to my vow and take it downstairs for a shower. I recite my vow to the sleepy person in the mirror. Repeat after me, I say, and he laughs. I carry my vow. I tuck it inside my briefcase. I run it through the x-ray machine in the airport in 6 cities a month. I hide it in my passport. I slip it in the money belt between some yen and a Canadian $5 bill, right next to the Queen's cheek. I spend it everywhere I go. It's currency that's not tagged to the dollar. It's a better investment than gold, for sure. I see my vow on television. I hear it on NPR. Poets speak it between the lines of Pulitzer Prize winning rhymes. Doctors scrawl it across prescription pads. Maybe I will have it tattooed on my shoulder when I'm old enough to know better. I see my vow on billboards and subways and train stations. It's been in more zip codes than a chain letter. The stewardess says, in the unlikely event of a water landing, your vow may be used as a life vest. She's right, of course. I ride my vow. It takes me everywhere I want to go. It does not use gas or even biodiesel. It is 100% sustainable, green. A fine vehicle in a world of junkers. I wash this vow. I wring it out. I shake off the water and it hangs me out to dry. This vow is squeaky clean and guaranteed not to shrink. This vow has been pressed more than once, but still it has some serious wrinkles in it. I have broken my vow. Oh yes. I have repaired it. I have held it together with super glue and baling wire. I will use bubblegum if I have to. I have framed it and I have copied it 108 times and still managed to forget it. I have thrown it out a second-story window and run down to retrieve it, crying all the way. I have set it on fire, I have torn it to shreds, and I have pieced it back together in a new shape over and over. This vow is mine, but it does not belong to me. It is ancient, but each time I see it, it is shockingly new. This vow was a gift from my teacher, but he doesn't know I have it, and who am I to spill the beans? I have shredded this vow, pickled it, and dried it at high temperatures, and after all that, it's still juicy. I am sorry to say that I have on a few occasions left my vow in some pretty bad places. I have gone back to get it. I have dropped this vow off at bus stops and shelters and the houses of strangers more than once, but I have never abandoned it. Even if I did, you would find me. So, my question to you to ponder is, what is your vow? What is it that calls you back to Zazen? That impulse that originates maybe in your heart or in your gut. Maybe it resonated as you listened to those words of deep experience. That part in you that has no concern for praise or loss or gain. And what is the authentic process? To let it flow through you stronger than those worldly winds. That's what I wanted to share this evening.